Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fortify Your Front Lines, funding cybersecurity with the State Local Cybersecurity Grant Program, aka SLCGP, and beyond. I'm Michael Paddock, CEO of Grants Office, and I want to welcome everyone to today's session. We've got a great session for you on the increasingly talked about topic of cybersecurity. And we're very happy to have our sponsor, CrowdStrike, with us today. Thanks to CrowdStrike for making it possible for us to bring you this information today. And we've also got some great presenters from CrowdStrike as well, as we'll talk about. Before we get started, we've got a few housekeeping items for you. First of all, as many of you know, you can listen hands-free over your computer speakers or headphones. There's no need to dial in by phone, but if you do become disconnected from your speakers or headphones, you can always dial in. Go to the audio and video menu at the top of your screen. And if you're not seeing the audio and video menu at the top of your screen, look for the show menu bar. That should bring up that audio and video menu to find alternative ways to connect to the audio portion of today's session. And if you miss big portions of it, don't worry. The session is being recorded and the replay will be available ostensibly where you registered for today's session, but also Kate will be putting into the chat the location where you can find the replay and the slides and other helpful resources as you're beginning your cybersecurity funding journey. So that'll all be available to you. You can ask questions at any time using the question and answer interface at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Again, if you don't have a question and answer interface at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, go to the three dots at the very bottom right and click on Q&A, and that should open the window for questions and answers. Send in as many questions as you'd like, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of today's session. Okay, so we're talking about funding cybersecurity with the SLCGP program and beyond. We're going to talk about a CrowdStrike cybersecurity threat report. So we'll get a sense of what is the landscape that we're looking at. We talk about cybersecurity funding. What exactly are we securing ourselves against? And then we'll talk about the cybersecurity funding landscape, funding for local and tribal governments, for K-12, some thoughts on justifying your cybersecurity needs. And then we'll talk more about CrowdStrike solutions to a lot of these issues before we get into Q&A. And to talk about all these things, I'm joined by a fantastic panel of knowledgeable experts here. We've got Matt Singleton, Executive Strategist for CrowdStrike, Deborah Blythe, Executive Strategist for CrowdStrike. We've also got Amanda Day, Grants Development Consultant here at Grants Office, and Sam Rawdon, a Grants Development Associate here at Grants Office. So I couldn't imagine a better panel to really shed light on both the issue of cybersecurity as well as some of the funding opportunities that are available to support your cybersecurity initiatives. So let's start out with the CrowdStrike Global Threat Report. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Singleton. Matt?
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate you having us on today. We're going to hit just a few things to orient us around the threat landscape before we dive into the grants conversations. I've got just a few slides. I promise I'm not gonna geek completely out on you, but I do want to kind of walk through what we're seeing. This first slide that you see here is a data point that I used quite a bit prior to joining CrowdStrike as I was the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Oklahoma. I used this Poneman report, which transitioned to the IBM report around the cost of a data breach quite often in that role. And it's one of the reports that I stay on top of even after my transition to CrowdStrike. This is an interesting thing to use for kind of building that burning platform around cybersecurity, but it also gives you some great visibility into the primary attack vector. You can see it there in the purple banner. We're up to 292 days for dwell time based off of stolen credentials, which has become the primary attack vector that the Poneman and IBM institutes have identified in their 2024 report. The other thing I'll call out here is the average cost per record. It's $173 per record breached. I call this out specifically because this is something that I used as I was negotiating third-party contracts at the state. A lot of times you had to try to identify some sort of a common metric that could be used. And most organizations agreed that the Poneman and the IBM reports get you in the ballpark to understand what the liability might need to be for individual contracts. So a couple of great data points on this slide. As we transition over to the 2024 Global Threat Report from CrowdStrike, you guys know that this is one that we've been publishing every single year, and 2025 is no different. This is the premier threat intelligence report in the industry. And every year the report has a theme. This year's theme is the enterprising adversary. And we chose this theme based off of what we're seeing our adversaries doing. Over the last few years, organizations have gotten really good at protecting kind of their core assets, their enterprise assets, really managing those assets and getting better visibility on those things. And our adversaries are having to come up with new and enterprising avenues for them to achieve their endeavors. And so this seemed like an appropriate theme for this year's report. Jumping into the next slide, we'll start looking at actual metrics. And this is where things get really interesting. And I guess I should say, I'm going to take a really high level view of the Global Threat Report. The very last slide we have in my section is a QR code to download the report directly. I encourage you to do that. I know it's always weird when you're talking to cybersecurity folks about using QR codes. I promise this one's safe. But you can also obviously Google it and find a direct link yourself. But I encourage you to dig into it because we're just gonna scratch the surface today. So year over year, we've seen a 442% increase in voice phishing activities. And this takes the form of what you've probably heard about in terms of bad actors contacting the help desk and impersonating individuals with elevated privileges, convincing the help desk to reset passwords and MFA tokens. But there's also the other side of that coin where the help desk is calling end users. And there are some interesting case studies in the Global Threat Report I encourage you to look at, specifically around Curly Spider, where we actually observed an adversary who was, they identified the target and did what we call spam bombing, where they sent hundreds of spam emails to that individual's inbox in a short amount of time, and then contacted them by phone shortly thereafter and said, hey, I noticed there's something weird going on with your account. We probably need to do something about that. In basic human nature, the individual said, yep, let's fix this. I've seen what you're talking about. I can't keep this thing going on, so let's fix it. Adversary convinced the user to give them access remotely. They downloaded some malware, started creating credentials. All of this happened within the span of about 4 minutes. So again, our adversaries are moving very quickly. But just the use of voice phishing and social engineering in general have seen a significant increase year over year. We've also seen a 50% increase in access broker activity. And those of you who have been tracking the report for a while know that access brokers are those individuals who specialize in breaching usernames and credentials, usernames and passwords, posting those on the dark web for sale. And we've been tracking individual unique advertisements and seen a 50% increase year over year. The last thing I'll call out on this slide is the lateral movement. Breakout time is something that we've tracked for years. In 2018, the time from when an adversary would get access to your environment to the time they would do bad things was almost 10 hours. That was in 2018. Every year since then, we've seen significant decreases in the breakout time. You can see on the screen here, 51 seconds is the fastest that we've seen last year, but the average is just under 48 minutes now. And so again, our adversaries are moving very quickly and improving their sophistication. On the next slide, we'll dive a little bit deeper into the social engineering aspects. There are some really interesting things happening around the impersonation of IT support, as I mentioned, the Curly Spider, but then also using MFA resets to access single sign-on and cloud applications. Adversaries are really moving quickly using social engineering capabilities and actually incorporating generative AI into their exploits. On the next slide, you'll see what we're talking about in generative AI. You've probably heard about the extortion, the transfer of $25.6 million. We had an adversary in Western Africa actually used generative AI to create a deep fake conference call with a financial firm CEO and convince that CEO or as the CEO and convinced a financial associate in that financial firm to actually transfer that money voluntarily. And so generative AI is continuing to be something that we're tracking very closely. We're also been able to identify phishing emails that have been created by generative AI versus humans. You can see the stats there. Looking at the click-through rates, generative AI has gotten pretty good at these phishing emails. 54% are being clicked through as opposed to 12% that are authored by humans. And the last thing I'll talk about in terms of generative AI, you may have seen a case study that we published in fall of last year. Is actually around our Falcon event on famous Kolyma, where a North Korean adversary group has started actually placing human assets within US-based companies. The generative AI portion of this is as the investigation has continued, we've been able to identify that they're using generative AI capabilities to build out their LinkedIn profiles, to assist them in responding to interview questions. And actually there's some really interesting and scary videos out on the CrowdStrike website of the actual Zoom interviews for these adversaries, interacting with the HR specialists in these companies. You can kind of see how this all plays out. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the expansion of our Chinese Nexus adversaries. 150% across the board increase in exploits from China, but specific industries are seeing between 200 and 300% increases. China has gotten very good over the last couple of decades. They've significantly invested in their cyber capabilities. They're now on par with most of the nation, the leading nation cybersecurity capabilities. So something to definitely keep an eye on. They've also gotten to where they're actually specializing. So there are adversary groups that are focused on specific industries and doing things like using forward operating bases within the cyber realm to actually launch their attacks. So it's harder to identify where it's coming from. On the next slide, you'll see that we're talking about cloud conscious adversaries. This is another one where a few years ago, you could see our adversaries would kind of stumble into an environment and fumble around a little bit while they figured out what they had and what they could do. Our adversaries have gotten much more specific and much more deliberate in their cloud exploits. And so seeing a significant increase in cloud conscious adversary activity, 25% increase just in cloud intrusions overall. But again, identity continues to be a thing. If you remember from the very first slide from the Poneman Institute, number one attack vector, 35% of cloud intrusions are using valid credentials now, folks. So it's really important that in addition to securing your identities for on-prem systems, think about it in terms of your cloud environments as well and how those interact with your on-prem solutions. Also starting to see more and more cloud conscious adversaries that are exploiting the new generative AI and large language model environments that organizations are starting to embrace. If an adversary is looking for intellectual property, these are really interesting targets because in order to train these models, organizations are uploading a ton of their proprietary information into these cloud environments. And so our adversaries are identifying those primarily through the cloud control panel. It's a great one-stop shop, makes reconnaissance super easy and super fast. And so our adversaries are taking advantage of that wherever they can. The next slide, one of the other main things that we've seen is vulnerability exploits, and this is nothing new. Most organizations know you need to patch your vulnerabilities. But what we're starting to see is our adversaries are using the generative AI to help with the reconnaissance and help identify specific targets they should pursue. But they're also using them to collect information around vulnerabilities, and pointing them to publicly accessible databases to pull down which tools have vulnerabilities and how to exploit those things, and building out new capabilities for their adversary groups as a result of that. And the other thing that they've started doing is they know that most organizations are prioritizing patching based off of CVSS scores. So, a lot of organizations have a policy that says if it's a score of 9 or above, I've got to get that patch installed within the next 24 hours. If it's 7 or above, maybe it's 2 weeks, right? Our adversaries have figured out that if they can daisy chain a couple of lower priority CVSS scores together, they can accomplish a lot of the same things. So if I take a CVSS score of a 3 for remote access and a CVSS score of 4 for privilege escalation, all of a sudden I'm off to the races. And so it's really important that organizations start prioritizing patching based off of what's actively being exploited. The last thing I'll talk about on the next slide is around software as a service. A lot of organizations think, hey, it's a SaaS offering, I should be good to go, security's taken care of. That's partially true, right? Part of cybersecurity is understanding the configuration and ensuring that you have the proper controls in place at all times. Our adversaries are starting to identify really Office 365, Microsoft 365 environments are frequently targeted, but misconfigurations there, especially around the security controls, are making it really easy for our adversaries to get in and do bad things. And what we're seeing is a lot of the misconfiguration is done by the administrators for those environments. Maybe they're trying to make it easier to get through, get some of their work done quickly. Maybe they've disabled multi-factor authentication or something along those lines. Our adversaries are absolutely jumping on that. So stronger MFA is essential for software as a service solutions. That gives you just a quick orientation of the threat landscape as it stands today. I'd encourage you again to go out and download this threat report. I saw Debbie dropped a link to it in the chat as well. Take some time, read through it. A lot of great information here, and know that CrowdStrike is here to help you work through whatever strategies you might need to better secure your environment. Michael, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Matt. That was really, you handled it pretty fast, but that was a great overview of cybersecurity threats generally and for specific types of platforms. So really appreciate that overview. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Day to start us off talking about the cybersecurity funding landscape. Amanda?
Thank you, Michael, and welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. With these types of threats continuing to rise, it's necessary to implement those cybersecurity measures now. And grants are a great way to help with the cost of those solutions. So we'll start off today a bit of a general cybersecurity funding information, and then I'll get into some specifics of how cybersecurity technology is being funded through those state and federal grants. And then Sam will cover a K-12 overview of that grants landscape. So where are these funds coming from? There are 3 main sources of funding when we talk about grant funding. First, we have money coming from the federal government. These funds are coming straight from the federal government in the form of competitive programs. So applications are done right through the federal government, or as a formula grants where funds are directly awarded to either states, cities, counties, based on certain criteria like population. The second are pass-through programs. So these pass-through programs, essentially, states are awarded funding and they come from the federal government, and then those funds are passed down to local applicants. And often with these grants, states are able to keep a certain percentage. For example, SLCGP states are keeping 20% and passing down 80%. So it just depends on the grant program. So the state agencies can keep some of that funding for their own cybersecurity needs, essentially. And then the third type of grant is a state level grant. So think of these as budgets are allocated to state level programs. So for example, New York State has their own cybersecurity grant program. Florida had their own cybersecurity grant program. And those funds came right out of the state budget, with revenues coming in from income tax or general taxes on things like cigarettes and gasoline. So those are the three types of funding that are generally available. And within those three types of grants, cybersecurity funding can be split into two distinct categories. So first is cybersecurity focused grants that are specifically targeted at cybersecurity initiatives and provide financial support to organizations aimed at enhancing just cybersecurity measures, resilience, and capabilities. But what's far more common is grants that are considered technology friendly or cybersecurity friendly, meaning the funding agency is motivated to award funds for your project based on a complete and comprehensive idea rather than that specific technology or cybersecurity solution. So think about a homeland security project, a public safety project, or a transportation initiative where cybersecurity is a necessary component of that larger goal. And Sam will get into a little bit more of the weeds on these two types of grants a little bit later, but that's just kind of a general overview. In the first type of grant, the cybersecurity focused grants, there are a limited amount, but there are funds out there. So these grants are typically created, the cybersecurity friendly grants are typically created to solve problems, and primarily those problems are focused on social benefits, but the cybersecurity focused grant was created to specifically address cybersecurity needs. So at the federal level, as you can see on the slide, the Tribal Cybersecurity Grant Program. This was a program created to assist tribal governments with their cybersecurity needs. And the Rural and Municipal Utility Advanced Cybersecurity Grant provides funding to rural electric utility providers to help combat cyber threats in the electric grid. And then an example of pass-through funding would be the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program, which I will dig deeper into later with some information on where that program is and where it's going. This grant is the biggest and most important cybersecurity grant to come from the federal government. It was created in 2021 and is funded for 4 years so far. So it's a cybersecurity focused grant that provides funds to state and local governments for cybersecurity planning, cybersecurity hardware and software, and for workforce training, which is really important. Most of the grants that you'll see for cybersecurity include workforce training in some manner. Like Matt was saying, a lot of these things are human error, clicking on links or giving credentials away and things like that. So workforce training is a big part of these grants. In addition to those two types, we have state level programs. Some states have chosen to fund their own state level programs, like New York and Massachusetts have their own. And South Dakota is in the initial stages of creating its own program. They're setting aside $7 million for local governments to purchase cybersecurity solutions. It's in the beginning stages, so I'm not sure where they're headed with that, but that's something to consider if you're in South Dakota. And hopefully this is a trend. It may continue as federal funding is up in the air, so states may take the initiative to start their own programs, as well as taking advantage of those federal funds. As far as cybersecurity friendly funding, there are several agencies that include cybersecurity in their grant guidance. The top three, as far as funding amounts, are listed here. The DOT, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and Bureau of Justice Assistance all include cybersecurity as an eligible expense in their guidelines. In addition to these three major funders, there's also supplementary funding allocated for various purposes like election security, water and sewer infrastructure investments, transportation, as I mentioned, broadband initiatives. So really cybersecurity is part of every sector. And while there are a limited number of cybersecurity focused grants, there are many grants out there that will fund cybersecurity as part of that larger project. So that being said, we have to kind of think about building that more comprehensive, not just cybersecurity focused project. So what does that look like? The goal is to think about how your cybersecurity needs fit in with that larger project or mission goal. So your organization has a mission-driven effort. So how does cybersecurity fit in with that when you're applying for grants? The technology-friendly grants will absolutely fund cybersecurity as long as you're able to connect the dots back to how cybersecurity is just another tool to help you accomplish your goal of improving your community. So some examples of the type of project might be a homeland security project, like an anti-terrorism, emergency management, preparedness goal, election security funds again. For law enforcement, programs like body-worn cameras or rugged laptops, dash cams, things like that, all need cybersecurity protections as sensitive information is at risk from hackers and cyber criminals. Water and sewer infrastructure is now being targeted heavily by hackers and ransomware. They receive funding to improve cybersecurity through grants. And as these systems become increasingly connected through digital technologies, they'll become potential targets for cyber attacks. Again, this is a sector that's becoming increasingly vulnerable to attack. And finally, public healthcare is another at-risk sector. If you think about this one, we're talking about lives being at risk. So cybersecurity is critical in protecting sensitive patient information, but it's more critical in protecting facilities from ransomware attacks that can result in shutdowns and essentially endanger lives. So there's many other areas where cybersecurity is grant fundable, but these are just a few examples. So I want to kind of dig deeper into the state and local cybersecurity grant program. So I'll give a little background of what the program is for those of you that don't know, and then kind of let you know where we stand and where we're headed with this program. So this program was created as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in 2021 under the Biden administration, and it is administered through Department of Homeland Security and FEMA, with partnership with the cybersecurity agency CISA. They're kind of overseeing the application process for this program. So if you click on their website, they'll have a lot of good information about the program. Funding is slated to run 4 years, so fiscal year 22 through 25. But our hope is that this will become a cyclical grant like the other FEMA and DHS grants and will be funded in future years. I really am optimistic that this will be a continuing program, as cybersecurity is not something that is going away or is, a one and done funding opportunity. As part of the application process, states developed cybersecurity planning committee, and then those committees created a cybersecurity plan for each state. And that plan was submitted to CISA for approval. And then after the plan was approved in that first year of funding, the state was allocated their funds for fiscal year 22, and they were able to open their own programs. So each state has opened its own program in its own time. And as states receive their share of the grant money, it's up to them to further divide it at the state and local levels. So as I said before, the state can keep 20% at the state level for state agencies, and then 80% is passed down to local agencies. As far as how those funds are dispersed, there's actually a few separate ways that they can do that each state has chosen to do that. So first, actual grant monies can be provided for the applicant to choose and purchase their own cybersecurity provider and products. North Carolina, California, Kansas, they have all chosen to go that route. Secondly, purchases can be made at the state level, and then the state will provide those cybersecurity solutions to eligible applicants. Some states felt that this was kind of a better use of the money, as if you look at it as a bulk purchase, and then they were able to provide services and training to local governments. States like Colorado, Indiana, and New Jersey all selected CrowdStrike as their partner, providing Falcon Complete and other solutions to local applicants. And the final option is a hybrid model, meaning they could do a combination of both of the previous two. So they can do some grant awards and then products to other applicants based on the technology needs. So New Mexico is one of the states that has chosen that hybrid method. As far as deadlines go, it's all over the map. Each state runs its program completely differently. So some have opened and closed all 3 years of funding. North Carolina, Kentucky, they've all opened and closed those first 3 years of funding, while others are just now opening up the first year of applications. So it's really just a matter of checking your state's progress and the application process to find out where the state is in the process, what the deadlines are, and how to apply. And at this point, almost every state has a website dedicated to this program. There are a few that don't have a publicly accessible website, and it's a matter of contacting the administration, the state administering agency, to see how those funds are accessed. So as part of that program, a certain percentage of the state and local cybersecurity grant program funds were used to create the tribal cybersecurity grant program that I mentioned earlier. This is a separate grant, but again, it uses funds from SLCGP. So it's generally the same guidance, but this one was specifically created for tribal governments. The availability of funding is based on population size of each tribe, and that is listed in the guidance. There are 4 separate buckets based on population size. But one thing I do want to note about this program is that tribes can apply at their state level SLCGP program and apply for TCGP, but not for the same project, if that makes sense. They can apply for both, but they cannot receive grant funds from both programs for the same project. So they would have to choose one award over the other. They can apply for both grants for different projects and keep those award monies for those separate projects. So as far as deadlines go for this one, tribes applied for funding last January. They combined the first 2 years of funding for 18.2 million. And then this third year, they have not announced an application window for this yet, but you can check the FEMA website or the CISA website for deadline information. I don't have a date for you to kind of give you an idea of when it's going to open. So it's just a matter of kind of keeping your ear to the ground and checking those websites regularly. So where is this program going? We are in the final year. So states will apply for their fiscal year 25 funds later this year. I'm thinking late summer, early fall. But as I said before, our hope is that this program will continue to be funded through the federal budget in subsequent years. In early April, as you can see by the slide, the U.S. House Subcommittee, led by Representative Andrew Garbarino, held a review of the program with representatives across several areas from the private sector. There was a representative from Utah on the panel. Panelists testified about the program and pointed out what has worked well in their state and what they think could use some improvement. And they answered a lot of questions from lawmakers, kind of trying to get a better idea of how well this program has worked and what they could do to improve it. So it's a positive sign that the program is being brought to the attention of lawmakers. That gives me hope that this is not going to be ending in 2025. So hopefully we'll find results of this subcommittee in the coming months. I included a link to the meeting recording. It's rather long, but it really did provide a lot of great information and great feedback from those panelists. So if you do get a chance, take a listen to it. Like I said, it's a little long, but it's quite interesting. So again, while there are limited number of cybersecurity focused grants, those grants that just are funding cybersecurity, I did want to highlight some other grants that include cybersecurity funding opportunities in their guidance. So it's pretty obvious that the Department of Homeland Security would be a major funding source, as most of these grants focus on anti-terrorism, emergency preparedness measures, and things like that. So on the right, you'll see a list of all the DHS grants that have that cybersecurity focus on them. The series of Homeland Security grants like State Homeland Security Program, Tribal Homeland Security Program, and Urban Area Security Initiative, Operation Stone Garden, and Transit Security Program. They all fund projects that focus on creating a secure and resilient nation, and that includes cybersecurity in that guidance. As you can see, along with other security measures in the list, cybersecurity is called out as one of the national priority areas for these grants. So it's definitely an option to look at a Homeland Security project to get cybersecurity funding, and it's a really great resource. These are some great grants to take a look at. So next, election security grants. So the state Homeland Security grant actually sets aside 3% of its funds for election security, so that's an option as well. But the HAVA election security grants, These are formula grants, meaning they were passed directly to states, that were first appropriated in 2018 to enhance election technologies and make election security improvements. So this includes cybersecurity as part of that election security improvement. So funds can be used for cybersecurity improvements as well as physical upgrades such as cameras or door locks, things like that. And typically, this is a biannual grant, so every 2 years, funds are allocated to each state, but a total of $15 million was made available this year in the continuing resolution. So in most states, the grant is overseen by the Secretary of State or a state elections division. It's just a matter of finding out in your state who is administering these funds and how local applicants can access funds. Each state does it differently, so it's a matter of checking your state. Some other areas are obviously there's cybersecurity in every area, but some of the main concerns are it's necessary in transportation, criminal justice, utilities. If you think about it, it's fundable with any grant that funds technology. So, as cybersecurity is a necessary component because it protects digital systems, networks, and data. So the first section of grants, the utilities grants, utilities kind of encompasses broadband, water and sewer, electric grid, things like that. So it's critically important for utilities because these systems are foundational to national infrastructure. Utilities like electricity, water, gas, and telecommunications form the background of modern society. A cyber attack on these services can cause widespread disruption, economic damage, and even loss of life. So cyber criminals are continuously targeting utilities as a possible for ransomware, or just kind of targeting them to take over systems and things like that to cause harm. So I'll give a quick aside of an example of a potentially harmful attack that I had personal experience with. So in Oldsmar, Florida, a few years ago, a plant operator saw his cursor being moved around on his computer screen, and it was going to different functions and opening various functions on his computer. And this hacker boosted the level of sodium hydroxide, which is essentially lye, to 100 times the normal level. And the operator immediately reduced the level back to normal because he was sitting at his desk. But had he not been there, these levels could have caused serious health damage to the public. And the state of Florida noted this attack and really kind of took action. They created a state level cybersecurity grant program in 2022 and 2023 to help combat that type of threat. So this is a perfect example of the kind of damage that can be done if systems are not protected from hackers. In modern transportation systems, these systems rely heavily on digital technologies that, if compromised, can cause widespread disruption, financial loss, or even endanger lives. Cybersecurity is vital for safety of passengers and operators of these systems, and to ensure system integrity and reliability. So the Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration are including a lot of smart technologies into grants. So cybersecurity, again, is an essential component to some of these grants. And finally, cybersecurity is also crucial for the justice system because it safeguards the integrity, confidentiality, and availability of sensitive legal processes. Law enforcement and correctional facilities, in addition to judicial systems, often share data. There's a lot of networks that are connected, so a breach in any one part of this can compromise a whole network, and making coordinated cybersecurity vital in the criminal justice sector. So I've spoken a lot about what is available in state and local governments, tribal governments, how they can apply for funding for cybersecurity, and kind of how to fit that cybersecurity into that larger project. So at this point, I'm going to pass things over to Sam to cover funding for educational institutions and to provide some additional cybersecurity grant guidance. So take it away, Sam.
All right, thank you, Amanda. So with a better understanding of cybersecurity funding as a whole, I would like to shift into cybersecurity funding for the K-12 sector specifically, where over the course of several years has become crucial for protecting student data, securing district networks, as well as preventing cyber attacks. But luckily, some of the programs Amanda touched on earlier can also assist K-12 schools in strengthening their cyber posture, as well as to help them become more resilient to cyber threats. So if you live in the K-12 space, many of you are probably familiar with the FCC's Schools and Libraries Cyber Pilot, which leverages about $200 million in unused E-rate funding, specifically for improving network security postures, not only for K-12 schools, but libraries, as well as consortiums of both types of agencies. Now, this program is still in its pilot phase with selected participants announced back in January, but it is designed to explore how USAC funding, which also runs E-rate, can support cybersecurity for schools and libraries. So the FCC will determine after this 3-year pilot period if they will continue to fund this initiative to help cover the costs for many types of cyber solutions and services. K-12 schools can also take advantage of SLCGP to improve their cyber posture as well. Amanda just covered SLCGP, I think, quite extensively, so I won't go into too much detail on it here, but K-12 school districts are most certainly eligible to apply as well. Programs like SHSP as well as EMPG, as you see there, both support efforts to prepare for all kinds of emergencies, which can include cyber threats. Schools can qualify for funding under both of these programs, mainly through partnerships with local emergency management agencies or Homeland Security offices. And also both programs can especially be useful if the school is part of a broader regional or, say, citywide cybersecurity initiative that's centered on activities like training, planning, and even running simulated cyber attacks or incident responses. And then NSGP can help private or faith-based K-12 schools that are designated as 501c3 tax exempt by the IRS to enhance their cyber posture against potential threats. So you can see K-12 isn't entirely left out in the cold when it does come to state and federal funding sources. So when we do talk about cybersecurity in K-12, it is important to point out that cybersecurity isn't solely a technology issue. It's also a mission-driven priority, part of which Amanda sort of touched on, that can affect student learning as well as their online safety. So first, it has to be part of a mission-driven project. It's important to remember that grants are not just funding the hardware or the software for the sake of it, but rather approaching it more strategically. So it's important to ask, what are the project's needs and goals? Are you trying to protect student devices for remote learning, or protecting sensitive student information, or even trying to modernize your infrastructure? Think of how these needs and goals came about. Then ask yourself, how will cybersecurity support those goals? For example, if you're expanding on, say, one-to-one device initiatives or shifting toward a hybrid or fully online learning environment, cybersecurity is going to be important in making those efforts safe. It's also important to determine the school's current cybersecurity status. Are there firewalls? Are systems being consistently monitored for threats? Are staff and faculty properly trained? Think of how cybersecurity is already utilized in the school's ecosystem to determine needs and goals. And finally, what are the risks? Conducting a vulnerability assessment is really going to be key here in determining what specific risks are currently being faced. So the other side of that coin focuses on how cybersecurity can benefit student learning, because in K-12, it's not solely about the protection, but it's also about enabling a safe digital learning environment for students. Cybersecurity concepts can be integrated into the existing curriculum, as a way, as an innovative way to teach modern skills like problem solving or critical thinking. Cybersecurity can also promote digital literacy for your remote or hybrid learners through, say, digital citizenship programs, or even increase the scope of teaching and learning efforts to more under-resourced communities. A strong case can also be made centering on the creation of a career pathway in cybersecurity, since it has become such a booming industry. So initiating a career and technical education program or even a club that's centered around cybersecurity can spark interest in it and really lead to true career opportunities. And then finally, it can even potentially support dual enrollment initiatives if students are taking, say, college level courses online in a CTE related field like cybersecurity or even computer science. But the bottom line is that cybersecurity for a school is not just about the tech upgrade, it's also about the educational mission. So it is important to ensure that cybersecurity ties into your broader goals, as Amanda mentioned, but as well as addressing student outcomes. So with those key points in mind, here are some K-12 specific funding examples where cybersecurity can most certainly apply. Starting with the Distance Learning and Telemedicine Program, or DLT. This program is designed to support rural K-12 schools by expanding distance learning opportunities, often in partnership with colleges or universities. The important part here is that cybersecurity is a critical component of delivering those online learning services safely. So if you are, if your school is using DLT funding to support things like virtual classrooms or teleconferencing with partner institutes, you can also include cybersecurity tools and training in your request, because now protecting students and educators who are learning and teaching online has become a fundamental need. Another example is 21st Century Community Learning Centers, which supports extended learning time opportunities for students attending low income and low performing schools. So such as implementing after school or summer programs. These programs can certainly include technology education programs with a cybersecurity focus. So if you want to start an after-school cybersecurity club or incorporate cybersecurity into existing STEM enrichment to reinforce what students are learning during the school day, this program can really help make that happen if it contributes to student learning in those extended time settings. And then one more example is Title V Perkins Career and Technical Education. This program supports building career pathways. So thinking about implementing or expanding a cybersecurity pathway in a high school CTE offering. This funding can be used for things, of course, the technology, but also things like curriculum, certifications, and even teacher training. Because the focus here is on workforce readiness, investments in cyber infrastructure or even instruction can be justified as helping students gain industry-aligned skills. Now, while it won't protect the entire school's network, it does provide students with a separate network to explore and learn on without disrupting regular cyber systems. So it's essentially giving them like a sandbox to play around in. So through these programs, cybersecurity can be supported when it aligns with an education-driven mission like distance learning, extended education, or even workforce development. So regardless of whether you're a municipality, a state or local government agency, or even a K-12 district, the biggest thing when it comes to cybersecurity funding is being able to justify those needs in an application. So going back to what Amanda spoke to earlier, it is important to remember the two distinct types of cybersecurity grant funding that's out there. Those grants that are cyber focused, and then those that are cyber friendly. First, cyber-focused grants, as Amanda said, are those specifically intended to support initiatives that strengthen an organization's cyber posture. These programs are designed exclusively to facilitate the purchase and implementation of cyber technology, many of which Debbie will get into a little bit later, as well as training programs that build the skills and awareness of personnel that are responsible for managing or interacting with these technologies. But the overarching goal of these grants is to help organizations proactively prevent, detect, and respond to cyber threats by enabling a comprehensive and sustainable cyber strategy. So think of a program like SLCGP. We would consider this grant to be a cyber-focused grant, since its main objective is to fund the technology and services necessary to improve an organization's resilience to cyber threats. And then on the other hand, cyber-friendly grants are those that, while not exclusively focused on cybersecurity, allow for cyber-related expenses to be included as part of a broader project. These grants typically support multifaceted initiatives like infrastructure upgrades, digital modernization, or emergency preparedness, where cybersecurity can be an essential supporting component. So in these cases, organizations can use part of the grant toward cyber measures like securing new systems or protecting sensitive data. But effectively leveraging these grants requires showing how cybersecurity is going to align with and enhance the overall objectives of a larger project. Thinking of programs that I just mentioned, like DLT or Perkins, these we would consider to be cyber-friendly grants, since the technology required plays a role in a much larger mission-driven project that benefits student learning. So while similar in nature, it is important to clarify these differences. So depending on your project's needs and goals, this will ultimately be a deciding factor as to which sort of grant that you would like to pursue. But keep in mind, ultimately, it is about how the CrowdStrike solution you may be considering aligns with the overall mission of the cyber grant itself, and how well it integrates with other elements of the projects. Grants typically support comprehensive projects, not just the individual products themselves. So this pie chart illustrates how a typical cybersecurity grant budget might be distributed among various components. So while the CrowdStrike technology that you're looking into will be a key part of it, a well-rounded project will also include other necessary parts, such as maybe hiring project managers, maybe looking into cybersecurity consultants, or even providing training for IT staff or system administrators to effectively implement and manage the solutions. And then before passing things over to Debbie, I'd just like to wrap up by just focusing on some tips to justify cybersecurity in grants. So if you are considering a particularly technology-rich grant, such as SLCGP, it is important to keep that bigger picture in mind and really not lose the forest through the trees. So one of the most important elements of any grant application is presenting a well-articulated needs statement. So just simply saying that your organization lacks the modern technology is usually it's not enough to justify the funding. So instead, funders really want to understand the why, as Amanda touched on before, specifically the societal benefit that technology will bring. So focus on how cybersecurity is going to help address that underlying challenge. So for example, rather than saying our IT staff needs improved endpoint protection, a stronger justification would be to strengthen our ability to prevent, detect, and respond to cyber threats targeting sensitive data. We are requesting funding for the deployment of CrowdStrike's endpoint protection and response platform. This type of need assessment does more than just request the stuff or the things, but it also shows how technology is supporting your goals. Also consider what additional elements outside of the cybersecurity itself that you may need to ensure project success. So this might include things like staff training or consulting services, all of which can be funded together or in tandem with the technology itself. And then equally important is involving both the IT team as well as solution vendors like CrowdStrike early and often in the planning process. Their input is really going to help ensure the technical accuracy of a grant application, as well as increases the likelihood of a successful project. So when preparing an application, be sure to save formal quotes from CrowdStrike and any other technology providers. These quotes are often required as attachments and can also help validate your budget estimates. And then also your IT team and vendor contacts, they can even help translate technical jargon into clear and compelling language for your budget narrative, which is something that many of us really don't speak fluently. So with that, I'm now going to turn things over to Debbie to talk about CrowdStrike solutions. Debbie?
All right, very good. Thank you so much for that helpful information. So Gartner says that most organizations have 45 or more security tools, and these siloed security tools really create two major problems. So first of all, we see adversaries exploiting security gaps, and they're able to easily hide between disjointed tools like AD, Entra ID, EDR, cloud versus on-prem, and even SaaS apps, as you heard Matt talk about earlier, and all of the other tools in your environment. And security teams really struggle with inefficiency. They've got too many tools, too many alerts, too many consoles, and perhaps different teams that are responsible for each tool. And of course, manual correlation slows response. So CrowdStrike really solves all of this with a unified platform, one agent, and one console for all capabilities, leaving adversaries with nowhere to hide. As a modern endpoint security leader, CrowdStrike is here to help you outpace and outsmart the adversary by giving you complete visibility, allowing you to track the adversary at every step of the way. It also provides AI-powered prevention and detection, which is built into the core of the sensor, and it allows you to detect and stop attacks based on AI and adversary behavior operating in the cloud and locally, and allows you to conduct unified investigations, automatically building a complete picture of an attack with full context and intelligence, with incredibly elegant search for efficient investigations to find stealthy adversaries. And it also provides integrated response, allowing you to respond quicker and more intelligently across your entire enterprise with integrated response. There is also an aspect of precision. You can fine-tune responses with scripts and deploy to individual machines or groups of them, and or interact directly with individual machines. And lastly, it's super easy to deploy and operate. The Falcon platform is delivered with a single lightweight agent. It is easy to deploy rapidly, and it's all in the cloud. There is no on-premise infrastructure to maintain. And most of you know CrowdStrike because of our more than a decade of expertise building the world's most advanced EDR offering. But CrowdStrike continues to innovate and evolve, and that means a paradigm shift to a completely unified EDR and XDR offering. So you can start at the endpoint and then easily activate extended capabilities through XDR to extend visibility and control across all key attack surfaces, unlocking cross-domain detections, investigation, and response across your entire enterprise. So this simply allows you to see more, to know more and to do more across all key domains in one easy-to-use unified command console. And Falcon Insight XDR customers now get 10 gigabits per day of free third-party data ingestion with over 100 one-click connectors with parsers to jumpstart their cross-domain investigations. So in addition to supporting native XDR use cases with first-party Falcon data across all CrowdStrike modules, customers can also leverage their existing best-of-breed technologies to augment this visibility and combat sophisticated attacks across all key security domains. And if customers wish to exceed this 10 gig per day allowance, a seamless upgrade to the fully featured next generation SIM offering is quick and easy. CrowdStrike brings all of this together into a single unified console, which your team can drill down into attack paths and explore impacted hosts and identities, providing the context that is needed to triage, remediate, and manage security operations with confidence and speed. The CrowdStrike AI native XDR platform is cybersecurity's AI consolidator, and it's purposely built to stop breaches. It is powered by a single lightweight agent, which collects and integrates data from across the enterprise, including endpoints, cloud workloads, identities, and third-party data sources. By unifying disparate data sets and building conversational AI and automation on top, security teams are able to ask any question of all data and drive automation across the SOC to gain the speed required to beat the modern adversary. The platform consolidates and replaces legacy point products across key areas of security and IT, delivering a unified modern approach that reduces complexity and cost and saves time and stops the breach. And then lastly, if you want to get a quick view into your security posture or try some of these capabilities, it's really easy and it costs nothing to get started. So CrowdStrike offers 3 different security risk reviews at no price, or no cost, I should say, to give you visibility where you might be lacking currently, and that might help you to justify additional controls that are needed or actions you might need to prioritize for remediation. So we have an identity security risk review, a cloud security risk review, and something brand new, a SaaS security risk review. So you can reach out to your regional sales manager, or you can get started using these QR codes. So thank you so much for your attention. I know we're a little bit over time, and so now we're going to open it up for any questions you might have, either for the grants office or for the CrowdStrike team.
Great. Thanks very much, Debbie. Great information there. Really appreciate your contribution. So we did have a couple of questions that have come in. One came in regarding the federal delay on the release of SLCGP funds to some states. I would encourage you to reach out to the grants office team directly for information about your state specifically. We also have a living page on right off our homepage that's constantly being updated with new information about the various executive orders, the status of various grants, and so on. And so you can find that right on our website at grantsoffice.com. Okay, other questions that have come in here. We've got a couple. We're a little over time, so I appreciate you sticking with us for another minute or two. This one's for Amanda. What can grant funds be used for multi-year contracts?
That's a good question. That comes up a lot, actually. It depends on the state that is administering the grant. So in case of SLCGP, the state of Texas will fund a 1-year contract, but other states, if it's a 3-year grant, they will fund 3 years. The State Homeland Security Program is a 3-year grant, so that will fund a 3-year contract. But it really is in the guidance for specific grants, which grants will fund multi-year contracts and which will not. So it's really a matter of either reading that guidance, and if it doesn't specifically say, reaching out to that program manager and kind of asking that question, because that question does come up a lot when I'm consulting with local governments.
Great. Okay. And one for Sam. Will the FCC release another application this year or in the following years for the schools and libraries cyber pilot?
Yeah, great question, Michael. So as of now, the FCC has not announced any plans to open another application window for the cyber pilot, not only for this year, but also in subsequent years. That initial application period closed back on November 1st. And the selected participants were announced back in January. So these participants are currently engaged in the program, which spans a 3-year term. But really, given the high demand of over, let's say, 2,700 applications requesting $3.7 billion in funding, the FCC is likely going to consider this strong interest when they are evaluating, say, the pilot's outcomes and deciding on future funding opportunities. Yeah, but that's a really good question.
Got it. Great. Okay. Well, we are out of time, unfortunately, but I want to thank our presenters, Matt Singleton, Deborah Blake, Amanda Day, and Sam Rawdon for sharing with us your knowledge and insights. I did warn everybody that we had a lot of content to cover today. Thanks for sticking with us. Big thanks to our sponsor, CrowdStrike, for sponsoring today's session, making it possible for us to bring you this information. And to all of you, really appreciate your participation in today's session. Great questions. I hope you found this a valuable use of your time, and we'll look forward to seeing you again on a future webcast. Have a great day, everybody.